I love it, man. I'm digging this.
That's good, man. Welcome back to Race Podcast. This is your virtual big brother, Rico Yasso. Race Podcast brings you inspiration, mentorship, and community to help you find wealth in your voice. And we do it with that Latino sabor. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Race Podcast on iTunes and really anywhere you can catch a podcast. And also just check out our website, racepodcast.com. This is probably be close to episode 200 of Race Podcast. I've been podcasting. This is your virtual big brother, Rico Yasso, and I'm a podcaster for the last 2.5 years and just really loving this new medium here, Blab. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, what are you doing? Get on Race TV show. And we record an episode of Race TV here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And you can catch it at blab.im/Race Podcast, and that'll be in the show notes. But just check out Blab. We're on here on a regular basis. On today's episode of Race Podcast, I'm going to share later why I said F Tom Brady on Sunday. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. It's not what you think. He actually was very helpful on my fantasy team the other day. But first, I want to reflect on it's right after Thanksgiving when we're doing this show. And I want to discuss the concept that is really sort of theme of Thanksgiving as we kind of are continuing the holiday season, the concept of gratefulness. And we love to say that word, but I want to push us today to think about what that means and how we need to transition our mentality oftentimes from being grateful to living grateful and living gratefulness as part of your daily routine, not just for holidays and spiritual celebrations. And who better to be part of these conversations than one of my young boys, I like to say. You heard him on a recent episode talking about developing an app to engage millennials in social media, particularly around the political process. One of our rising young leaders nationally, Andre Del Valle. Andre,
Hey.
welcome again to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
And as I said, we weren't recording. The Q rating is just going up. This is awesome. And for you're wondering, no, it's not one of the Jonas brothers. It's Andre Del Valle.
No.
So, Andre, what brought you to our? Why don't you tell people not familiar with that didn't listen to your podcast episode with us recently, and we'll definitely have it as part of the show notes for this so people can hear it. But tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what interested you about this conversation today.
Sure. Well, my name's Andre Del Valle. I'm a recent LaSalle University grad here in Philadelphia. Created an app called Nutshell Politics, encouraging millennials to go out and vote, learn about the elected officials. It's a free mobile app in the Apple Store, and I hope you guys after this get a chance to check it out, and hopefully give me some feedback on it.
Yeah, and Andre, and during our conversation, we'll definitely touch a little bit more on Nutshell Politics and your journey as from a student activist, basically, to a community activist, to an app developer. Mm-hmm. And I see Felix is very interested in what you're talking about. I'm telling you, I'm making a connect. I need a cut of the action. And Felix Montalada is joining us through his chat comments. What about the conversation, Andre, around sort of living grateful attracted you to joining us on Blab today?
You know what? It's especially I think it's great that you're doing this right after Thanksgiving. A lot of times you take for granted what you have throughout the year. A lot of people are so busy, you just don't get a chance to really focus on being grateful. You don't get a chance to really focus on your family, and you don't get to take that step back. And I think that's a very important topic that you're hitting on. And of course, the F Tom Brady definitely caught my attention there.
Yeah. It's probably not gonna be what you're thinking. But
I figured it's not.
But we could definitely touch on the NFL and talk about. This is not an episode about sadness, so we're gonna minimize the Eagle talk because that is just
that is brutal. That is brutal.
Very sad, very sad. So, what we're talking about today, we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff, depending, and then it could definitely evolve this conversation. But for those listening to the podcast, I really wanted to just share some thoughts about, we talk about being grateful, and that's like it almost it's said so much nowadays. I think sometimes it loses its teeth, right? And so I really want to challenge us today about what does that really mean? What does that really mean in your day-to-day life about living grateful? And I really want to challenge us to think about how you really incorporate gratefulness into our daily lives. And so the first concept I really want to talk about is that you've got to embrace gratefulness at your lowest point, even at your lowest point, because without your lowest point, you're not going to be able to ultimately grow. I mean, you can't grow without pain. And through I talked last week on last week's episode that we did here on Blab about how as I approached my birthday recently, I wasn't feeling too good about it, and not because I'm not grateful about the great life I have, but quite honestly, it was because when you get to my stage in life, and at times in your life, and you've been an overachiever, whatever you want to call it, or career oriented, you kind of do a report card about your career stuff, and when you don't feel like you've gotten straight A's, you can kind of feel down about that. Especially, I don't know if it's a guy thing or an overachiever thing or whatever it is. And so, but my friends and family, my really my social media, Facebook community, sort of straightened me up in reality. And so I did sort of, that woke me up to the importance of this gratefulness conversation. But it got me thinking about kind of how to live grateful. And so, looking back on the biggest challenges I've had, and thank you, Carmen Sanchez. Thank you for joining us, and feel free to join this conversation talking about gratefulness with good friends like Felix and Andre. That I am so grateful for my setbacks. I mean, there's some of the things that have been the biggest turning points in my life. Losing a political election, went from being a local activist to a national operative because of basically losing an election. Personal setbacks that my wife and I not being able to have a child for about 5 years, and that leading to us finding our oldest son, Troy, through adoption. And then as soon as we got him in our house, my wife became pregnant and we had Max. So, some of the greatest, from the darkest moments. Hi, Carmen, feel free to jump on. From the darkest moments have come the biggest growth spurts for me. So, it was about 2 years where I was feeling really down about my career, kind of feeling like it hit ceiling. And I didn't get out of it until I did something about it. And I'm really grateful for hitting those bumps, because I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel like I'd hit a crossroads. When I talk about that concept, Andre, about really holding on to greatness and letting greatness guide you out of those darkest moments, how does that resonate with you?
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I don't think I can relate, with the whole child aspect. I'm being, so young still. But I can definitely relate it to some different points in my life. Not getting into law school, different points. For example, my high school counselor telling me I wasn't college material, and ended up going to college. It's some of those things that I feel it's part of life. It makes you stronger. You need those low points, so how to carry yourself, how to make yourself stronger, how to continue on. And I think it's one of those things that you got to look back, and sometimes you can't be grateful for all the positive things in your life. Sometimes you got to be grateful for those negative experiences that make you realize, life isn't this so bad. You have a lot to be thankful for and a lot to be grateful for.
No, and gratefulness is also a tool to help you get out of the funk.
That is true.
When you're going through those things, being able to hold on to something like gratefulness, understand that it is indeed going to get you, past this. And what is the phrase my buddy says? I have a brother-in-law that says, what is it when the brightest sun comes out of the deepest clouds, or it's something. He's saying it a lot more articulately than I am, but definitely. So I think that's definitely something that we should definitely hold on to, in terms of, we just can't be grateful when things are going well. Right. We have to really embrace gratefulness throughout, and live with that as we move forward past our challenges. The other part is, I think I wanted to share is that I don't want people to confuse gratefulness with being satisfied. What's that line? And I like the line, and I like him with his music stuff. T.I. says something to be one of his songs a few years ago, something to the effect of, be grateful what you got, instead of worrying about what you don't got.
What you got.
And I'll push back on that just a little bit. I mean, I agree generally with the sentiment, but I'll push back on it a little bit, just because I think a lot of times people equate gratefulness with sort of like settling. Like, okay, at least I have this, so I can't complain. But okay, on some level that's true, but on another level, you have to embrace you have to embrace gratefulness, uh, and be grateful for not just what you have, but the possibilities
Hmm.
that you have to serve others. And
Absolutely.
so I think you have to hold on to that. Andre, you're an overachiever, and you always are pushing yourself. How do you incorporate sort of thinking big with these personal concepts like gratefulness?
I mean, honestly, I've been so lucky, especially at such a young age, to experience what I've been able to experience. I've been, I was able to go to college, able to graduate, able to work at City Hall at age 22, which not many people can say they have. So, I'm definitely thankful for all those opportunities. I think that experience really helped me out. I think it builds me every day. And you know what? Some of the experiences I've gotten at work, seeing what people don't have, what people do have, what people need. I think that's what's made my character today, and I think that's why it's pushed me to really strive even further. I want to not just do what everyone else is doing. I want to take it one step further, and see what happens, and see how I can help other people.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Andre, I would imagine in your particular the kind of work you do, does guilt ever come into play? Because I always felt that way. I was, I struggle with sort of handling the guilt of it. I mean, for someone for my socioeconomic background, I've kind of, especially as a male of color, to have gotten the education I've gotten and the opportunity that I've gotten, statistically, it's almost like winning the lottery. I mean, I'm not trying to be,
Right? No, I
dramatic
agree with
about
you.
it. And so, do you ever, hey, what's up, puppy? One of my little guy here is hosting here on the side, my associate producer, and so Max in the building. When you're dealing with some of your clients that are really going through some real serious stuff, does that ever come into play, and how do you sort of handle that?
Um,
And I'm going to step away just for a second to get him some apple juice, but please answer.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
right here.
No, I think in my field, I think it's very difficult, um, not to be sympathetic to people. I think you have to be sympathetic to the people that come into our office. A lot of people are coming into City Hall, not being able to pay their water, not being able to pay their property taxes, not being able to afford a turkey for Thanksgiving. And I think that's something that it really brings you, and it makes you humble. It makes you think about what you have. It reminds you of the good fortune that you have, how lucky you are to have it, how lucky you are to have a home to sleep under, how lucky you are to have running water. So I think it's it brings you down. I think it brings you to the level where you have to be humble, for all the good fortune that you have, seeing what other people don't have. Because sometimes we take that for granted, I think.
Yeah, no, and I think it could be the guilt piece for me has been a positive, right? Because it's driven me, it's forced me to think about, well, why was I so lucky, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like I I skated by. I mean, I worked pretty hard to be in this position, and so you take advantage, whatever the phrase is, take advantage of the opportunities. But
Right.
it does make me contemplate like why, and I think part of the out of those feelings of guilt and gratefulness and all that stuff kind of combined, it's like, well, it must be for something special. And so when I have those moments, it brings me back to pushing myself to say there's got to be, and I talked about it on the last episode. I don't know if you got a chance to hear it or see it, but the last episode I did on Blab talking about, well, it the feedback I got on my birthday made me realize it wasn't that what I was stressing about was that I didn't know my direction or wasn't living my purpose. It
Mm-hmm.
was that my stress is not living it in a way that shares it with more people. It's about my platform. And so that felt good, because if you're on the right track, that's just the marketing process, and trying to figure out my brand and figuring out the right vehicle to connect with people. So yeah, all these things come into play here. So I just want to again remind people that are checking us out on Blab. Thank you again for joining us. This is Ray's podcast, now Ray's TV, for those watching us here on Blab. And Carmen and Felix, and anyone else that's checking us out. Really appreciate you joining us today. Race Podcast brings you inspiration, mentorship, and community to help you find wealth in your voice. I believe there's so many people like Andre and well, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people I've connected to in my life and my career that really should be wealthy with the kind of talent and skills they bring to the table. So we're trying to build a community here to support each other in that journey to just help more people and be compensated to their value, which is something we're all seeking. And one of my compadres, Albert Garcia, has joined, and he certainly is welcome to join us here in this conversation. Albert, there's one of my young boys, Andre Del Valle, in the building here. So, Andre, before we get to our a few of these other concepts around living grateful, let people know they can catch you on social media.
Sure, absolutely. I'm on Twitter at Andre F. Del Valle. That's DELVALLE, Andre, ANDRE, at Andre F. Del Valle. You can also follow my app's Twitter page at Nutshell Politic, no S. And feel free to, I'm always on Twitter. I'm always on my social media. So, definitely check it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. So again, we're talking about living. How do we transition really from being grateful, feeling grateful, understanding you got to be grateful, why it's important to truly living grateful. And we first talked a little bit about sort of being grateful all the time, even in our darkest moments, as well as really being in the framework of being grateful, not only to the life you have now, but not just being satisfied with what you have, but really looking at it about living a life that's grateful, that's boundless, with boundless possibilities, because you cannot confuse gratefulness with satisfaction and being satisfied. And Felix is doing some Google research on you, Andre. Do you have a relative that's a boxer?
My cousin's a amateur boxer. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Felix is on top of it, brother. No, if Felix has clearances, he'll know what's going on with you very soon. So
yeah.
For sure. And again, really appreciate Kadming and Albert and others that have joined us here today. The other concept I wanted to discuss with you, Andre, and the rest of our Race Podcast community here. And again, if you're listening as the podcast, definitely subscribe to Race Podcast at racepodcast.com. iTunes, anywhere you can join, listen to a podcast, subscribe to a podcast, and just check us out on Blab. If you want to see us in person and then engage with us, that's what Andre's doing today. You can check us out 10 p.m. Tuesday and Thursdays, blab.im/race podcast. The other concept I wanted to discuss with you is that, to live grateful, you have to embrace leadership.
Yep.
First of all, just to be grateful at your darkest moments takes a whole lot of leadership, because it's so easy to wallow in self-pity, in depression and confusion. And so just that simple act, people have to own the fact that is a very big step in leadership. The other thing is that when you're a big thinker, when you live with boundless possibilities, you're sticking out from the crowd, my friends. And I've shared on many episodes, Andre, and the people that are listening, that I'm 40. Well, now I'm 41. And again,
not a day over 20.
Oh man, I'm still looking good. I'm out of shape, but I'm still cute. But yeah, I got to work on that. But thank you, brother. I appreciate it. You're so kind. You're such a politician. I must say that, and my buddy Elby can appreciate this, is that good intentions. One of the things that I struggle with is when you're still going for it and still on the grind independently and really thinking about your life with those boundless possibilities at this stage, your peer group, you're really an oddball, because it's one thing to be that way 20 years ago, but when you still feel that way and absolutely feel that way, and I'm not going to quit at all, it can be a lonely experience. And so one of the things I'm finding is that the untold story of these social media mechanisms is that, everyone's connecting that's like-minded, I guess, on some level, but this is really attracting people. These forums really attracting like-minded people that still got something in the tank. They know they got 3-4 more gears to go. And I shared on Periscope, sort of the Periscope version of my rant about Tom Brady a few days ago, is that, hey, Lisa, you should join in here with Andre. That takes a lot of leadership. I mean, you gotta embrace it. You gotta be grateful for being the oddball. You gotta be grateful for still feeling like you can go for it. Carmen Sanchez on the line here for folks that are listening to this. Carmen very astutely points out, yes, embrace leadership because there is a unique strength and wisdom that is produced to impart to the next forerunners. So very, very good. Carmen, I believe, Carmen, what are you, Carmen, a life coach or something? And Lisa Santos chimes in, one of our regular co-hosts and producers. I see these handsome fellas. Thank you. I'm telling you, man, I love being your wingman, Andre. There's no question about it.
It has its benefits.
I'm telling you, there's no question. So, Andre, talk to me about how your thoughts about leadership as it relates to living a life of gratefulness.
Like I said before, I think if you're going to be giving back, it can't be something that you're forced into doing. A lot of people, some people do community service just because they have to do it for high school, or unfortunately, a lot of people nowadays, it seems like they're doing community service just for that Instagram picture, that Facebook post, that hey, I gave back. And I think if you're going to be doing anything as a leader, giving back, I think it has to be out of the kindness of your heart. You don't have to be telling people that you're doing it. I think it's something that has to come from truly from the heart. And I think when you do that, I think it humbles you. I think it opens your eyes to the other side, the other side of life, of how people live in the trenches. I think as a leader, you got to be the ones that are always out there, the forerunners, at the forefront there. And, as a leader, you always got to, it can not only be you have to bring people along with you. And that's what makes you a great leader. Is if people see you doing it, they're going to follow you because they like the movement.
That's a really interesting point because, again, I, especially in my podcasting career, I like to one of the things I think is funny is that I feel a lot of times like the St. John the Baptist of Latinos in podcasting. It's like I found these platforms now. I feel like it will blab because nobody's heard of blab. It's like so new, and like I feel like I found this ocean of like this platform, and I'm like yelling and screaming like, "Hey, everyone over here! Look what I found!" And it's really and again that leadership, and we being the leader in the beginning sucks because. You're one of the first ones that figured it out. And so, and I remember in my compadre, my dear compadre, who's on and needs to get on in this conversation and get with. There he is. We would sit around in college talking about how come there's only 7 people coming to our meeting, with the political stuff. And at the end of the day, leadership is about what those 6 people at that meeting see you do. And that you're taking action when it's not popular, when it's not fully fleshed out, and that those 6 people will be your evangelizers to build that movement. So that it is about not going with the crowd and having that inner strength. Albert Garcia,
how you doing, Mr.
on the Race Podcast, brother. So Albert, Andre Del Valle. Well, I know you edited the show, right? That you promoted. You're my Albert Garcia. For those listening to Race Podcast and Race TV here on Blab is not only one of my Dominican brothers, no question about it, and the father of my wonderful goddaughter, but is the brain behind the scenes of Race Podcast as the technical producer. But brother, you had a blab just now, and I'm like, we got to get Albert out here. I mean, Albert's got the skills, brother. I was like I'm watching Carlos Rosa here, the new Charlie Rose. Excellent. Talk to me about your blab earlier, brother.
You put me on blab, so I'll give the props to
all
you.
These social media experts. I mean, I'm telling you, I know.
No, this is the conversation that it's about our health, right? It's about our mental health and how I think one of the things that I think people appreciate a little bit better now, but still don't give enough credit for, is how do we take care of ourselves while providing leadership for others. How do we keep our own energies up so that we can also, right? Because that's a draining process, right? That's a draining process to fight these battles. And the other thing too is, in many ways, it's like parenting, right? One of the things about parenting is that it brings up all these other unresolved issues, right? In terms of whether it's your own self-esteem and your own question marks as to whether you actually can do something. And so I think I think that's part of these things is trying to know how to balance all those issues.
Yeah, no, we have Lisa Santos has chimed in on the chat line here. Can I just say that being a leader also involves knowing what you're good and not good at doing, and finding those people and bringing them onto the team. So that's something I certainly can relate to. Albert and Andre, what do you think about that concept? I mean, there's a lot in that statement that Lisa just said around delegation, around self. What is it? Self understanding yourself. Any thoughts on her comments?
Well, I think it's hard because I think sometimes people in the positions that are in the best positions to bring teams together and bring a variety of different people together don't utilize that opportunity, right? And I think that's I think it's sometimes hard. I think there's a lot of people who don't have a real conversation with themselves, and for a number of different reasons, right? And they may not be reflective enough, or they may be just so busy enough to do that. And it's one of these things where, I mean, I'm always, having worked in politics, and having worked for a bunch of different people, it's hard to sometimes separate and have those conversations, right? So in some ways, we've got to make the space to be reflective, right? We've got to make the space so that we actually can take a hard look in the mirror. Because half the time, I don't think either we don't have, maybe I'm a little more positive. I think that some people don't want to deal with it. But I also think that sometimes some people are so used to not having to, that until some crisis happens, that they do that, right? So part of it is being proactive. Part of it is being proactive and trying to figure out these things. So that you can do it. But I mean, it's an essential point. I think she's right. And the hard thing about it is that as you get older, I think the natural fear creeps in that if you have to surround yourself, can you keep up, right? I mean, like you see that all the time, with people as they get older, they're afraid of losing whatever grip they have, on what they have, whether it's their organization, whether it's their reputation or their role, because they're afraid that, admitting weakness is some sort of, to admit you're weak, to basically admit that you're not as strong. And I think for men, that's even more difficult.
Yeah, no, interesting. Andre, what are your thoughts about Albert's comments?
I think he hit it right on the nail there. I think, what makes you a leader isn't, it's not individualistic. I think being a great leader means that you're able to form your team, that your team is willing to, follow what you're doing, following the movement. A lot of the times, people may think of a leader as just one person running the show, and a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times it's a leader is the person that's in the front, that's doing the grunt work, but they have a whole team that believes in the mission, believes in the cause, and that's why they're willing to follow that leader. And I think that's what makes you a leader, is knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, but being able to work together for the common good there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know for me personally, part of it is a bit cultural, because I know that Albert and I would always talk about in college that we tended not to study with each other. The Latinos would study like alone, because our mentality is like you're supposed to just sit there and do your work, and asking for help or the collaboration thing was a bit of a sign of weakness, or in that sense. And the Asian kids like always study together. They're always collaborating, and what a shocker. They did do pretty good in that area. And so, part of it, even for people that aren't uncomfortable with the delegation part or like the ego part of it, maybe it is an ego thing. It's admitting to need help, and maybe feeling bad to ask for help because you don't want to bother the other person, or there's a lot tied in there. Lisa, for someone that's not coming on, Lisa got a lot to say here. We'd love to have a lady on the Brady Bunch screen here. Well, it also goes into knowing what type of leader you are. Asking yourself, am I a visionary leader, et cetera? If you don't know what type of leader you are, you can't figure out what type of role you play on the team. That's your opinion, Lisa. Very good. And Carmen Sanchez jumps in. Above all, you must continue to share the vision and remind them why they joined, because there are times where in the rough times discouragement comes. I'll tell you, look like oh, Lisa, jump on. You're doing all good. So, Albert, I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple concepts we talked about earlier here on this edition of Race Podcast and Race TV here on Blab. I talked about the first couple of concepts relating to, this is about just not being grateful, but living grateful, right? So how do we do that? The first thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is how do we live, how do we embrace gratefulness at our darkest hour? Because oftentimes we're grateful like when it's perfunctory, like Thanksgiving, or when you go to church, or, when your baby's born. And when we need to embrace gratefulness is at our lowest point, because that's going to not only help us get out of it, but ultimately that's going to make us understand that we're going through this experience for growth. And I shared a little bit about, where I've kind of, that's been a challenge for me over the years. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that concept.
It's hard. I think that the thing is I think understanding, I think being grateful for the times really means about trying to be present in the moment, right? And I think that's and I think part of that is a bit of perspective, having a bit of perspective. And there's so many things now, technology-wise, we're surrounded by all these types of things that do a lot to throw us off track, right? To kind of keep us and lose perspective. I mean, even time is something. I mean, things that, when we were kids, like, we would go out and we would play for all amount of time, and now everything has to be a scheduled thing. And how many times I know I've been so glued to the schedule, right? To say, and especially when you're raising a child, it's like, the bath is at 7:30, the reading's at 8 o'clock, you go to sleep at 9 o'clock, you got to do all this X, Y, and Z, you wake up in the morning, you do that. How many parts of our life are scheduled that we forget to actually, savor it, right? And in some ways it's like a meal, right? Like how many times do you actually sit down and enjoy the meal as opposed to eating it to get to the next event, right? And so I think that it's hard to do that. It's hard. And we have to make space for it. I think a lot of times you just have to make space for things and just assume that won't change, right? But then that, it's the irony is you almost have to be kind of flexibly inflexible about your health, right? And about your perspective and your gratefulness and those things. I wanted to point out to something that Lisa said before about understanding what kind of a visionary leader or what kind of a leader you are. And I think one of the interesting things is also, and I think for all the people who are sports fanatics, I think this will come into play, is that, we change, right? And so just like, you're an athlete, if you're a baseball player, before you used to be a five-tool player, and when you get to your mid-30s, you might not be able to hit the fastball anymore, right? Or you might not be able to do certain things anymore. So how does that, and what you're talking about gratefulness, what's great about it, right, is that as a leader, you don't have to necessarily retire, right? I mean, you play baseball, you play football, you only have X amount of time. Your leadership isn't confined to like 5 or 10 years. What is confined is what kind of leader you might be, or what kind of role you might be. But no matter what role you play, you can still be a leader in those roles. And so I think that's something that people have to figure out. And it's especially important, I think, to especially in this generational shift that we're seeing, as a lot of folks of color, especially a lot of Latinos, are at this point of perhaps having spent decades with an organization or with an issue, and having now to transition to new leadership. And our community, unlike other communities, we don't know necessarily what to do with our elder statesmen. I think the question is, like, what is the role for the older activist or the older organizational heads? What role do they play in internal life? I think we don't do enough discussion about that model of leadership. I think you see it in other places. I think in philanthropy, you see it, whether it's in, other parts of life. But I think in terms of ethnically, that's a relatively new role that we haven't discussed. So I think, look, you could afford to be a certain kind of leader at some point in your life, and some people after a while don't. Now, that's not everybody. I think some people are just going to be the same throughout. But I do think that we also have to give ourselves some room for growth to be able to say, well, I'm going to play now a different role in this part of my life or in this part of the leadership experience.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Albert, and well, we're gonna that's a whole other podcast, frankly. But I one of the things I find, particularly with the kind of work I do, I work with a lot of executive directors and nonprofits, and people that many times we still have a lot of community organizations that the founder still runs the place, and quite successfully, and that generation of leadership is really struggling about what to do, so they're for the most part holding on to that job too long, that role too long, not because they can't do it, not because they're not successful, but because they really should be moving on to something bigger, better, for lack of a better term. And so but part of why they're not doing it is that it's like you said, there's no natural stepping stone for them, and quite honestly, there isn't. They're not seeing, especially as mature professionals, a lot of opportunities about making that kind of dough.
Right.
I mean, and having that kind of influence. So it's not like in other communities where they have more reach with the private sector, or they could get not everyone can get a federal appointment with the presidential administration. I mean, that would be an option, right, for people like in that space, or to run a mainstream organization. So you're absolutely right, and it's a real struggle because then it's choking the pipeline. Because what happens is that, especially with Latinos and nonprofits around the country, is that we have all these good people that work for these organizations. I mean, I work with hundreds of them around the country. I work with thousands, tens of thousands of these leaders. And it's one thing to be an executive director of one of these groups, making low to mid six figures, you got a little status. It's another thing to be extremely talented and be stuck at a mid-level point, definitely getting underpaid nonprofit management, but not feeling you have the network or the path to transition to do much of anything. And one of the things we're going to talk a lot about on Race Podcast, and I really appreciate people coming on here talking about inspiration, mentorship in the community so you can find wealth in your voice, is I want this to be a vehicle so that Andre's going to be fine, but, the Alberts and the Stephanie, all you people to figure out, okay, I can take my experiences and not so much be stuck in whatever my resume says I'm supposed to do, but transition and use those talents and skills you developed and especially to use these modern technological tools. So really appreciate people jumping on. There were so many comments. I know that Carmen Sanchez, it's hard for me to see it now, it discussed, kind of the short-term pain to go through long-term benefits. Felix also mentioned that everyone jumps on a bandwagon when things are going well. There's no question about it. As a leader, what I find with the leadership piece, you have to just kind of get over that. When there's bandwagoners, that's a good problem to have, So I remember and Albert was around when it was 5 of us getting signatures for me. But remember that weekend before the election, Albert, everyone came. I mean, it was like when people thought I might win.
Yeah.
Scared out of their minds. I said, man, this young boy did this all by himself. But it was kind of funny. But you get over those things. But they're lessons. Felix Montalada, the leader of the Potencial Millonario movement, mentions today is the 60th anniversary of Rosa Parks' historic act of passive defiance, which was led by MLK. Well, eventually the movement was led by MLK. So I'm glad, Felix, we had someone note that very important historic holiday. We, Albert, you teed me up for the next concept I wanted to discuss with the group here on Blab and Race TV is, if you're going to live grateful, you've got to own and embrace that today is day one. There's so many of us that live in the past and think that because they had a tough life or they got a couple of tough breaks in life or because they've been a fuck up in life or because, they don't have a pretty past or there's things that happen that they're not too proud of, is that that's their life sentence. And so, they're just grateful maybe to be alive but they're just trying to hide from the world. And so I feel so strongly about it is that, we carry around. So, there's so much to this. There's so many of us that live with guilt about something our relatives did, and we had nothing even to do with it. So wanted to get people's thoughts on that. Andre, in your young career, how do you sort of try to stay focused on today being the beginning, a new beginning?
Honestly, the way I look at it, I think every day is just a different day. which I mean it is. You know, a lot of times, and I'm going to relate this back to sports. Is, you know, it is your sports Latino podcast. You know, when you're playing baseball, one of the things that coaches tell you, you know what, forget about that error you made, forget about it, move on to the next play. You know, you can't think about your last play because it's going to affect your next play. And you know, that's something I carried on throughout life as well. Is I'm not worried about what happened in the past. What happened. Can I change it? No. But can I change my future? Absolutely. Will I make the same mistake again? I may, but at least I can prepare myself not to make it as bad as the first time I made the mistake. So you just got to look at each day as a brand new opportunity. You know, there's so many hours in a day, so many minutes in a day for you to make that change. And, you know, I just take full advantage of the opportunities that I get throughout every day. And, you know, I'm super thankful that I have that mindset, because a lot of people will, you know, have one bad day and it carries all out throughout the week or carries out throughout the month. You know, have a bad month, you know, it could carry on to having a bad year. And I think you can't have that mindset. I think you just gotta be able to rebound and push forward and, you know, carry on from there.
And that goes back to but I'm going to get to you. But that goes back to the first part of this conversation, right? Because it's how you look at that setback. Because if you look at that setback as a downer, it can linger. But if you look at that setback for what it is, which is learning opportunity, lesson, you know, I mean, how many times? I mean, again, I lost in a local election. If I had won that local election, I would have been a local political person. Because I lost that election, I became a national political person. Now, you know, you can debate what's more valuable, but the bottom line is that defeat led to a bunch of opportunities that were not even on my mind to consider. So that's just one silly example, but you know, one simple example from my career. But it goes back to how do you got to embrace that failure, because that's the only way you're going to move forward. You can't grow without pain. You know, I mean, you know, new teeth come out of my kids. It hurts a little bit, you know. So it's one of those things. So Albert, what are your thoughts about how we clean the slate every day?
No, I mean, I think that first of all, you know, pain is hard. I mean, look, I mean, it's a lot easier said than done, right? I mean, I think part of it involves a certain amount of forgiveness. And the deeper the wound, the harder it is to forgive. And the harder it is to forgive yourself, right? I mean, it's actually a lot easier to forgive somebody else than it is to forgive yourself, especially about mistakes and things, especially when you have a sense of what rides on it. So I think, you know, I think some people have it, you know, are a lot better at turning the page than others. And I think that some people also don't give themselves enough time to actually deal with the pain. So what you're spending a lot of times you don't want to deal with it. You can't turn the page because you've never actually looked at the page itself. And so part of that really is not giving yourself the right opportunity to be present, right? And part of it is being present in that pain, right? Allowing yourself to feel it, and then saying, okay, it is what it is. A job loss is a job loss. I got fired, right? Something like that. You got fired from a job. It is what it is. And at some point, and it's the continuing effect that's, and for some people, they're going to be able to turn that page. And some people, you have to just learn how to manage the pain. And I think it's easier said for others. But, you know, the Rocks, I saw something on the Rocks homepage a couple of weeks ago that I thought was very important.
Definitely Pennsylvania's own.
I'm just saying. But he said, and he was talked about like his own bouts with depression and a certain low point in his life. And he said that, you know, part of it is having the faith to understand that there's something on the other side of that pain. Right? There's something positive on the other side of that pain. And living here in South Florida, it's amazing to see how many, you get it when you live in South Florida, you get a chance to see a lot of storms rolling by. And I think part of it is understanding that storms happen, right? So storms, and especially in Florida, like the day can be incredibly sunny, and 2 seconds later there's a torrential downpour, and 5 minutes later it's over. And if you don't, unless you don't know that, you don't know how to deal
Good
with the
point. Yeah.
storm. And so part of it, I think, is understanding that the storms happen. That you can't. Some of them you can't. You can. You can avoid. But some of them you have to kind of roll through. Some of them you have to actually drive through them. And knowing how to do that and preparing yourself to do that, both mentally, with the support of others, with support of your teammates, and being a leader. I think going back into the leaders discussion is understanding that that's going to happen for different people in different parts of their lives, and they're going to react in different ways. And it's a certain amount of empathy, not sympathy, but a certain amount of empathy that you have to have as people go through these storms, whether they're personal storms or even just kind of professional or career storms.
We have, again, Lisa Santos has a lot to say here. So let's see here. She talks about cleaning the slate and being grateful every day. She wakes up before you start your day. Tell yourself something that happened yesterday and affirm to yourself that today's a new day. Create a positive affirmation and make sure you tell the comments are coming in quick here. Make sure you tell yourself the statement every morning before you even get out of bed. It sets your day up for greatness before it even begins. Felix Montelada refers to another political directed comment. Felix ran for office. I did not know that. I was the first Latino to run for county council in Prince George County, Maryland.
Lots of friends in Prince George.
Lost the election, and he managed to help an El Salvadoran young man win the county council election later on, and that person's gone on to bigger and better things. So, and Lace always says, have something a lot to say. Come on now. So, you know it, Lace, no question. But that's why you got to be on here. So, as it relates to that, and we'll get to the Tom Brady stuff in a second. Again, you're listening to Race Podcast and Race TV here on Blab. If you're listening to the podcast, you got to get with this Blab, y'all. I know, Lisa, our social media commentator, she's just floored that I discovered this. So we're glad that everyone's here joining us, and friends like Andre Del Valle and Albert Garcia are rays of light. And you'll hear Albert and Andre on all kind of shows. And Andre was recently highlighted. Andre, why don't you tell people about your app and a little bit about some of these concepts around leadership, gratefulness that we're talking about as it relates to your journey as an app developer.
Sure. So like Ray said earlier, I made this app. It's a free app in the App Store called Nutshell Politics. Launched here in Philadelphia in March of this year. It's pretty much created to help millennials, people who aren't involved in politics, learn about local elected officials. We currently have a few U.S. senators, all the folks that ran for office here in Philadelphia. It has their biographies, platforms, social media. Nutshell Politics. Yep, Felix, you got it right. So it's just an easier way of learning about the elected officials, an easier way of having that information in a nutshell on your phone. So it's to encourage those young voters to come out, learn about the officials, and actually come out and vote, because Philadelphia has one of the lowest voter turnouts in the country. So I decided to create something that hopefully can change that culture. And having this app and being able to do interviews, meet the different people that are encouraging me, it's been so amazing. Lace has been helping me a lot. Ray, you've been tremendous in getting the word out about it. So I'm always humble and always thankful for all the help that I can get on this.
That's cool. And Andre, and again, you can hear the full podcast that Andre and Lisa Santos co-hosted with that episode, talking about your journey from student activism and political activism to app developer, which was a few episodes ago, recently, about a month ago, that was released here on Race Podcast. So you can subscribe to Race Podcast. Check out our website, racepodcast.com, for the full interview. But just quickly, what about these concepts that we've talked about today, Andre, around sort of living grateful, getting out of your comfort zone to sort of merge your interests with politics and technology, that resonate with your journey today?
It's like you said. I mean, sometimes you just have to take that risk. Life from at least my short 23 years, it's about taking those risks. It's not being afraid of doing something different, not being afraid of trying to change a culture, trying to change, be that change in the world that you want to see. so I think that was one of the biggest hurdles that I had to overcome was, telling myself, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to put myself out there like that? Do I really want to be doing interviews? Do I want to be in headlines like that for an app? And do I really want to see that change in voters coming out, young millennials coming out to vote? And when I was able to answer yes for all those questions, and I had a lot of people supporting me, a lot of people give me the thumbs up to do it. I knew it was time to pull the trigger, and people like you, Ray. I mean, I absolutely would not have done it or had such success with it if it wasn't for people like you backing it up.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. That's as Chris Rock would say, that's what you're supposed to do, and certainly you're an easy person to support. The last thing I just wanted to touch on quickly, then we'll get into my F Tom Brady thing Sunday was, I really believe that as part of living grateful, sort of to lighten up the mood of this conversation, is I think you got to really enjoy yourself. And, I think a lot of times we become extreme. I see people that and people can relate to this, that I laugh because some of the most, and there's nothing wrong with being spiritual. I'm spiritual, I'm religious, but some of the people that go in a very strict religious direction. I don't want to say conservative because I don't want to. It's not a political ideological statement. It's really they go in that strict, fanatical, some would say, spiritual direction. It's because they were wilding out when they were younger. So like the pendulum swing, and so I think a lot of times people, sort of associate a focus and trying to progress with sort of a. Like someone told me the other day, said, wow, you're such a conservative person. And I'm like, you obviously don't know me after work hours. So as Elbert can attest. Look, on some level, it's like when you're working, right? But when you're out here, you're out here. So I'm just a big believer in that. And I think that I wanted to just make sure that was noted because I don't want anyone getting out of this conversation like, just focus on your career or just be a one-dimensional person because, and we talked about this earlier, and I think Carmen Sanchez alluded to this in her comments, is that you gotta celebrate the milestones. You've got to enjoy the journey. And so, yeah, would I like this to be on, basic cable? Sure. But I'm enjoying the heck out of this, as part of, and it's fun. So I definitely, I wanted to make sure we touched on that. Albert, talk to us about working hard and playing hard, because I know you know a little bit about that.
Working hard, playing hard. It's funny. I'm not sure how much playing hard I do these days.
Or do you just party when you're hanging out with me? Is that it?
I definitely set aside some time to play with that. It's funny. I think when you talked about enjoying life, one of the things I started to do several years ago is that I started to write down my daughter's conversations with me. And it's amazing, right? Because when she was young, I'm a nerd. I admit it. So I was like, wow, how is my daughter gonna sound like? How is what is she gonna say to me? And in some ways, true to being my daughter, once she started to learn how to talk, she hasn't really stopped talking. And I started to write these conversations down, and I started to post it on social media. And increasingly, I have a lot of fun with that. I have a lot of fun, and I have a lot of fun not only with that, but I have a lot of fun with other people.
Albert, Albert, it's your first book. No, I'm telling you, amazing. The dialogue is but the way you lay it out, it's intense, bro. I mean, I get emotional because you really are sharing some really touching moments, and the way you lay it, and then you're a really good writer, so you lay it out. Your editing skills really put a touch on it.
What's amazing to me, you talked about in terms of like having fun and keeping perspective, is the comments I get from other people and how it gets them to share their stories. And I think that's what's a lot of times is what's it about, right? And I think we have a lot of fun. I mean, things happen to us. I mean, I think for me, a tremendous amount of my humor and now comes from comes from my daughter and her friends or her kids and things like that. And I'm sure once she enters her teenage years, I might lose that sense of humor. But now that she's like 5 or 6 and in that age, I mean that's what makes it funny. And you just can't help but laugh. And the fact that I live in Florida, there's just a lot of funny crap in Florida too. So but it helps. It helps to be also, not to rub it into you Northeast people, but it helps to go outside and see the sun and be outside and take a walk. I'm blessed in that way. I'm blessed in that way that I get to walk outside and it's still 80 degrees in the middle of the night.
Albert, you and Lisa both touched on it in our comments here, in your comments, both verbal and Lisa on the chat. Lisa, you are not allowed to be on another show unless you come on video for
definitely.
at least a few minutes. But you're bringing too much skills to the table. These people need your voice. But and again, we really thank everyone for joining us. Stephanie, Felix, I know my brothers popped in and out. This is been really helpful, and you've all brought a lot to this conversation. Something that a few of you have touched on is this concept of writing it down. That part of gratefulness is actually not just thinking about it, but putting down on paper what you're grateful for, what's part of your direction. Andre, in the planning for your app and some of the other projects you work on, have you seen that as important in your career in terms of, whether it's gratefulness or what your game plan is putting it on paper to make it real?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Like I said, I'm one of those people. I'm probably weird for thinking like this, but I'm one of those people that's really grateful for the small things in life. Like I don't need like a brand new car to say I'm grateful. Just waking up and being able to see my friends, being able to see coworkers, have food, just basic things like that. I'm actually really grateful for. So throughout this journey with my app, having those supportive people, have people from high school, from grade school that I haven't talked to in years, reaching out to me saying, hey, that's a great idea. Keep up the great work. That's what I'm truly, truly grateful for. A quick story from Thanksgiving. I haven't seen a lot of my family members. I've been really busy trying to focus on the app, and I was actually really dreading Thanksgiving. And my family members were like, yeah, we understand you're busy. Although we wish we could see you more, we understand that this is one of your dreams, that this is something you want to go after. So go after it. And, that was that moment right there was something that I was unbelievably grateful for, is having that support of my family, knowing that, they may not be able to see me as much as they want, but they're very happy for me and for what I'm doing. So, that was definitely an awesome experience this Thanksgiving. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Lisa Santos chimes in on the chat line. I recently went to a gathering where we talked about writing down goals. I'm actually working on one of those activities we did that day. So yeah, definitely, Lisa, when you come back on, we can talk about goal setting. Albert, you're a scribe. Talk to us about how you incorporate writing down your goals in your daily routine.
Well, it's funny. I always remember, Ray, you can remember this. One of the famous stories that my wife will always say about how she, at some point in her life, a bunch of people, a lot of them women, have like this list, right, of what they want, right, or what they see in another person, another partner. And I just find it interesting, right, because a lot of times the better you write the list, the more likely that list actually comes to light. So look, putting it out into the universe means admitting it to somebody, and the first person that you have to always admit to is to yourself. And so writing it down is the best thing there. I probably don't write as much things down as much as I should, but I think that's definitely true. I mean, look, it's like any kind of habit. I think there's all these kind of things people say. Get a jar and put your ideas and goals, at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, see where you are. But again, I think part of it is just repeating it, because a lot of times we silence ourselves. In ways that we don't even know, that we're not even aware of. And so being able just to kind of write it down I think is is important to kind of do. So and goal setting, and goal, all these things. I think one of the things is that you just have to. It's a process. I think you have to be part of gratefulness is understanding that sometimes the process is what it is. It's the process. You can't rush it. It's like it's like cooking. Like you have to. You can't cook. You can't cook chicken in 15 minutes. And if you do, you're gonna get sick. Like it just happens that way. So unless it's like microwavable or whatever. But the point is like there's just some things that are just they take time, and I think it's harder to recognize that in our day and age. And there's just gonna it's hard to realize that. And so what do you do while your goals are cooking? Well, that's when you have a little bit of fun, and enjoy the process.
No, absolutely. And again, you're listening to Race Podcast and Race TV. I have it here going on a few different forms. But and again, I really appreciate everyone joining. And got a little feedback here. My son's got this phone on. But as we hit the last segment here of the recorded part of the show, obviously people want to hang. They can. I'm a night owl, so we have the conversation. But I want to get to the Tom Brady stuff. Again, you can listen to Race Podcast at racepodcast.com or subscribe to our podcast anywhere you can subscribe to a podcast. iTunes, podcast will be on Google Play very soon, which is really exciting. And you can check us out on SoundCloud, Audio Boom, Stitcher, all the above. Again, with a community of people that inspire, mentor, and provide resources. We want people to be, we want to help people find wealth in their voice. So, and we're having some technical difficulties. They might have to do it with this here. So it says I'm off. That's weird.
No, you're on.
We're still on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you guys are just in audio.
You're kind of caught in.
Again, this is Rico Yasa, your virtual Big Brother Race podcast, talking to Elbert Garcia, Andre Del Valle, some great friends. And we've got Stephanie, Lesa, Felix, Carmen Sanchez, a lot of good friends on the chat line, enjoying the conversation and providing a lot of great inspiration as well. So, and again, for people to follow me on Periscope, I spoke about this recently. I wanted to discuss a little bit why I said F to Tom Brady on Sunday. And so it was literally like 8:30 on Sunday. And what most red-blooded American men do, Sunday at 8:30, especially when their children and their family is asleep, you watch Sunday Night Football. It was a good game, even though it was a good matchup on paper. It ended up being a good game. That even though without Peyton Manning and young Brock Osweiler, very tall Brock Osweiler, it ultimately was a good game and something a lot of people watched. And I actually had a little bit of an investment in the game because Tom Brady's my fantasy quarterback, and with Le'Veon Bell's injury, he's really carried my team this year. So I on some level I'm quietly rooting for Tom Brady's success, but I didn't say F him because I was sitting there and it really hit me. It said, in this 3 hours or so I'm going to have, am I going to focus my attention on some people I don't know living their dream and watching all of us celebrate them living their dream on the football field, or am I going to invest this time in my dream? And so I know it may sound a little melodramatic, but in a lot of times I'll kind of go in between. I'll like watch the game while I'm working on online business and the brand and the podcast and stuff. But I would say that it really meant a lot to me to turn off the TV, because even if you mute it, you're still watching. Even if you put it lower, you're still watching. And the fact that I made that decision to turn it off, go cold turkey, I wasn't checking the score every 2 seconds on my phone, which we all do, right? It was a small step, but it was a big step for me. So I wanted to just share that with people and really get people thinking about, hey, nothing wrong with binge watching, nothing wrong with Netflix, there's nothing wrong with sports. I mean, I'm the founder of LatinoSportsTalk.com, which for our sports fans, definitely check out our homies over there. And I have a baseball show on Latino Sports Talk. So it's not to dismiss sports and getting that time to escape, but I wanted people to think about that concept, to really challenge it, to think about how we utilize time. Do we really not have any time to work on our dream? Do we really not have any time to take a step forward today? I shared on I forget if it was an episode you were on, Andre. I know Lisa was on it, but we talked about the Side Hustle podcast, Lisa. I remember this. That I was going to interview a celebrity, one of the bigger celebrities I've ever interviewed on his podcast, and I could only do it during my lunch break. I can't do that at work, but I needed internet access to do the interview. So this is so ghetto. So I parked close enough to a Starbucks so I could bum the internet access, the Wi-Fi, and the interview got done in my car. But Felix, look, this is what I tell people. Like, one of my grandfathers was fought in World War II. He lost 3 fingers in sheet metal. I can hustle a way to get Wi-Fi. I mean, that's the bottom line. So Andre, when you hear my analogy about prioritizing, about making those kind of conscious decisions to invest in yourself, what comes to mind?
Immediately the first thing that comes to my mind is I can relate. I've stayed up till about 3 or 4 in the morning. I work 9 to 5, and usually come home, usually have some meetings after work. But sometimes you got to be able to prioritize. Would I rather go out, hang out with my friends, or would I rather invest in something that I want to spend my time on? I take it as a hobby, but it's a hobby that I really am very invested in. And, I've stayed up till 3 or 4 in the morning. And so I definitely understand the hustle, the definitely staying awake, definitely having to prioritize. And, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to put down a football game. It takes a lot to, tell your friends that you don't want to go out. So, hey, I see that.
Albert, talk to me.
I was about to say, I think you should.
By the way, for a Jets fan like Albert, it's very easy to say F. Tom Brady. So this is, this is right in his wheelhouse.
And for an Eagles fan, right
something
now.
About that game. So it's ironic because as you were turning off, I was actually turning on for like the last 5 minutes, right? Because that's what I always do. I always turn on for the last 5 minutes of Sunday Night Football because I'm like, if I can just see the last 5 minutes of the game, I'll know whether or not it's really worth watching it or not. And to watch Tom Brady lose is always it was a great way to cap off Sunday night. But I think you should make a T-shirt. You should make T-shirts that say like, who's your Tom Brady? Like this week. Because I think because I think you're right about that. Sometimes we have to figure out what is that one thing that is getting in the way of getting to that next level, right? And sometimes it's the opposite way, right? Sometimes it's not spending the time with friends or family to give you the proper perspective, right? Sometimes it's letting work consume you, or letting, there'll be sometimes things where I'm working on some tech thing, and I know that there's nothing that I can do in the next 8 hours that's gonna move the process quicker. Like if I'm doing a whole bunch of things on social media, scheduling a whole bunch of tweets, there's nothing in the next 5 hours I can do that suddenly is going to increase, my click-through rates of something that I'm doing, right? And so understanding the balance of understanding that sometimes you need to get where you need to succeed, and only you know that, right? So what is going to push Andre is going to be different than what's going to push me, right? But making sure that he gets what he needs is also, if I'm his friend, part of my, part of what I can give him. Right, and making sure that we keep each other accountable to our dreams is also part of friendship, right? And part of partnership is doing that, right? Understanding that those goals are not the same, right? And this is, I think, sometimes in our personal relationships, the same thing, right? I mean, I think we're talking about our wives, our girlfriends, our significant others, my brothers and sisters in the LGBT community, like they're men and women. Like we have to recognize that the way they see their dreams is not the way you see their dreams. And sometimes the hardest thing about supporting them is also understanding where role you play in that. Right. And so I think part of that is, to get to the Tom Brady, who's our Tom Brady this week, trying to figure out those things that stop us and stop, the people that we care about. What are those things that stop us from getting there?
And it also is about time management and kind of a no excuses philosophy, right? It's almost like our friends in the military, they always tell me about these lessons about, there's no choice, right? Like you're trained to there's no choice. It has to get done. So it's about, and we've talked about this in other episodes of Race Podcast, that and for me, it's always a mental challenge around, you have to get to the point where it's about how you're going to do it. It's not if you're going to do it. And so it's a tiny little language proof reading thing or nuance, but it changes the whole thing, because if it's about if you're going to do it, there's always an inbred excuse. And so thinking about how you prioritize your time, how you manage your time, how you the resources you have. We talked recently on an episode about kind of getting over the fact that you don't have all the resources you would want, right? Like, I'd love to do this full time. I'm not at that point yet, and so I spent a lot of time over the last few years, sort of, not feeling good about that, and so, but taking advantage of the fact that, hey, we have this platform now. My family's at sleep at 10 o'clock. I know it's a little late on the East Coast, but guess what? It's 7 o'clock in California. It's whatever around the world. And if you're really into this, you watch it, or you watch the replay, or you hear it on a podcast. So you gotta work with what you got. Andre, as a guy balancing a lot of stuff, talk to us about that time management piece. How do you use these concepts to make those decisions, and how you utilize your time, and how do you incorporate? Do you have any thoughts on the life hacking? With these systems now, you can find, if you're smart about it, you can really save a lot of time doing it in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely, and I'd agree with Albert. It definitely helps when your friends are on your side there. If you have a friend that always wants to party and tells you, hey, put that off, you can do that tomorrow. That's not someone you want to be around. You have to surround yourself by people who are going to be supporting you, who know that they're going to have your support no matter what. For example, my roommate, he works in Atlantic City. He has to wake up at 4 a.m. So I know, bedtime's at 9 o'clock for him. Don't push it past that. And I know that he's always going to support me no matter what I need, either with the app or at City Hall. So, it's having that balance of having good people around you and time management. I'm so thankful. Lisa showed me what are the two sites? There's two sites. The Hootsuite that allows you to put out your tweets, all your social media. If I didn't have that, there's no way I would be anywhere to the point of where I am right now. Being able to schedule posts, it's really amazing what social media is doing now, what the different platforms are. Even this, I mean, who would have thought that you could connect with people in Florida, California, Texas instantaneously like this? It's amazing what technology is doing, which, really helps me. And just on time management, it's just having that drive of being able to say, I can have fun, but I also, Tuesday and Thursday, I need to really focus and work on this. And I think it's personal drive that you have to have in order to succeed.
No, and getting back to the social part is that as I get older, I realize if I hang out and have a good time one night, I don't have to do it 3 or 4 times. You know what I mean? One good time.
Right.
You can definitely still enjoy yourself and figure all that kind of stuff out. We're gonna wrap up the podcast version of the show. Again, I'm down, and if others want to join and lighten it up and chat about other things, we certainly can. And Albert, when we turn off the podcast, I'd like to, if you can stick around, definitely wrap. We could sum up a little bit the show you just had. I'd be cool to have that conversation, especially with some young college graduates like Andre and Lisa sticking around. But again, thanks for listening to Race Podcast and watching Race TV on Blab. There's your virtual big brother, Ray Collazo. For more inspiration, mentorship, and community, to find wealth in your voice, subscribe to Race Podcast on iTunes or anywhere you can get a podcast. And I'm going to be on Blab Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 p.m. And this may be a Monday through Friday thing. Who knows? This is a very powerful platform, but you can always email your virtual big brother, Ray Collazo, at podcastrays@gmail.com. And I really appreciate the group that's hung on for the whole show. And again, we're going to hang. So definitely feel free to stick around. But we're going to wrap up the podcast. Albert, any quick shout outs? Let people know where they can find you on social media. Can anyone hear him? Can you guys
No,
hear me?
no, you can hear me now. You can
Yeah.
find me on Twitter at LB Writing. You can also I do some communications consulting, and you can check that out at mifamiliaconsulting.com. And you can and hopefully you'll see a little bit more of my own writing as that goes along. And when you can check me out on not just on Latino Sports Talk and the Latino Talk Network, but also I do some work bringing academics and activists together on Law at the Margins, lawatthemargins.com. It's a great kind of social justice site run by Shamtoli Huck, a very down Bangladesh woman who is married to a fellow Dominicano. But that's another podcast for another time. I'm sure she can tell you a lot about Bangla Dominican culture. I'm sure that
the food at their house is fantastic. There's no question.
God.
Very spicy. I just saw her husband, and I had no idea you were working with his wife. So funny, but it's great to see Marvin. Andre, let people know again about the app and where they can find your social media.
Absolutely. So my personal Twitter handle is Andre F. Del Valle, DELVALLE. The apps is at Nutshell Politic without the S. And you should also like the Facebook page, Nutshell Politics on Facebook. And I'll put that in the chat as well. That way everyone has that.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So again, thank you all so much for joining the podcast. We're going to hang as long as people want to hang on Blab TV. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a fantastic day.